what are the most important games in the SEC this year, in my opinion? Well, I got 4 of them for you, Turner. I'm not just going strictly Bama's 4 most important or Georgia's 4 most important. I wanted to get around the conference a little bit here. So Texas A&M and Alabama, I got no problem saying, yep, that's one of them. I see we just spoiled it with the graphic here. That's great. Texas A&M and Alabama is one of them. That's October 8th. I don't really think much needs to be said about that, but it's not because of the Jimbo Saban thing. I'm thinking about which talent roster out there can push Alabama the most. And it's A&M. It was A&M last year. And it's A&M again this year, at least in the regular season. Now, we're looking at this before we know who's starting. Probably going to be Haynes King, but we don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback for Texas A&M. But my question about A&M is, what status are they in once they get to Tuscaloosa? Because it's not a cakewalk before they get there. Remember, they've got to play Arkansas. They've already played Miami by that point. They've got to go to Mississippi State the week before. And here's what I don't like. Those are 3 consecutive trips on the road for them. They play in Dallas, then they play in Starkville, then they play in Tuscaloosa. So that's like a back-to-back-to-back road stretch. The only team that had to do that last year in this conference was Arkansas. And the third game, the third leg of that 3-week road trip was a splattering on the road at Georgia. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Next up, Georgia at Kentucky in Week 12. We had a question the other day about whether maybe the Every Given Saturday tour could take a trip to Lexington for this game. And at first I said no, but then the more I thought about it, the more I think it's a distinct possibility, especially because there is no standout game. There's no immediate headline grabber that day. And this could be for the SEC East. These are the 2 odds-on favorites in the SEC East. I think a lot of folks out there believe if you play Kentucky that deep in the season, they'll already be out of the race. You could be right, you could be wrong. I'm just saying that's going to be a really important one, not just because of potential division standings, but independent of what the standings look like. Georgia is coming off easily their toughest stretch of games that sees them go to Jacksonville to play Florida. Then they got Tennessee at home. Then they go to Mississippi State. Then they go to Kentucky. So that's the 4th leg of a really tough 4-game stretch. It's the 2nd leg of a back-to-back road stretch. It's the 3rd time on the road in 4 weeks. That's not going to be easy. Not going to be easy at all. The Week 2 game in Fayetteville, I wanted to point out. South Carolina at Arkansas. Arkansas plays host to Cincinnati in Week 1. Then they get into conference play in Week 2 with South Carolina at Arkansas. This is certainly not a national radar game. But what I'm thinking about is the perception around Arkansas is not that they're going to challenge for the West, but let's see if they're better than last year and if they can improve on last year's record. Well, to do that, they can't have any hiccups this early in the year. They can't lose to Cincinnati. They can't lose to South Carolina. But yet, if you go over to Columbia, South Carolina, they're saying to themselves, dude, if we go on the road and we lose to Arkansas, then we got Georgia the very next week, because that's how the schedule starts for South Carolina. They play at Arkansas in Week 2. They got home against Georgia in Week 3. They're thinking to themselves, we may be 1-2 right out of the gate. Well, that's not acceptable for either program, obviously. Both of these programs are such that they're trending up. They have overachieved. They've developed a brief reputation of doing that. It's really fun to see those 2 collide this early in the year. The last one I wanted to touch on, there are a lot of conditions to this last one. LSU at Auburn in Week 5. LSU will have already played FSU in Week 1. They will have played, I think, Mississippi State, but this is their first real test on the road. You always learn something about yourself, especially in conference when you go on the road for the first time, but also think about where Auburn is at this point, because this is the last shot they have at taking advantage of a really workable early stretch. They don't leave home for a long time. Look at this schedule. Mercer at home, San Jose State at home, Penn State at home, Missouri at home, LSU at home, and then you won't see them much after that at home. They go at home, at home, at home. Yeah, so they got a lot of road stretch to deal with in the second half. But the first half of the season, they've got 2 conference opponents at home. The entire premise of hope for Brian Harsin and his staff this year is just protect home. Because they're thinking to themselves, and I'm thinking about Auburn, they've got a shot to start 5-0. They got a shot to start 2-3 too, but they got a shot to start 5-0 there. They will not be a big point spread underdog in any of those games. They'll be a very short dog against Penn State. They'll be a very short dog, if not a slight favorite, against LSU. And the point is, if there's going to be one of those sort of circling of the wagon type effects for Auburn this year, well, they've got to win this game. Well, what does that feel like for LSU? Because when LSU is looking at that early season schedule, they look at that trip to Auburn and they're saying, well, that's kind of a place, if we've got to go on the road, that we want to go. Because that's a weakened team this year. We can take them either venue. So if we got to go on the road, hey, why not go to Auburn? It's the beauty of this sport. A lot of people think that. There are a lot of games, when you look at that helmet grid schedule, where both programs fully expect to win. They see no reason why they should lose that game. A&M at Bama, Georgia at Kentucky, South Carolina at Arkansas, LSU at Auburn. Send it in. Those are, to me, 4 of the most important games in the conference this year.